Yeah, there's definitely more discernment for better or worse in the three. Is this person attachment worthy? Sixes are tracking everything, but like as in, like they're each dots,
Hmm.
but we're tracking them all versus sort of this like vague cloud of the nine. Because I was
The
trying to say,
big
but maybe
cloud of
this.
nine.
Yep.
At some level, I guess you always feel you're connected to the universe or something, right? Like so,
Some bullshit like that.
right?
Yeah.
The big hormone enneagram.
Let me lay it on the line. I got a little freakiness inside. Let you know that the man has got to deal with it.
Hi, I'm John Lukovich, sexual self-pres, 4 with 5 wing, 458 trifix.
Hi, I'm David Gray, self-pres sexual 9 with 1, 974 trifix.
What up? It's Emeka. I'm an 8 wing 7, sexual self-pres with 854 fixes.
Hi, I'm Nancy. I am a self-pres social 3, wing 4, with a 369 trifix. If you like our podcast, guys, make sure you go like and subscribe on the Apple Podcast app. And if you really like us, you should definitely leave us a review.
And what about two frustration types, John?
What about what?
How they relate.
What happens?
Like what's going on in a relationship?
Like I hear it and I don't understand both the rejection and the frustration types. This is again my lens. I don't see how relationship happens. And I know you could say the same thing about attachment. You could say that it's like fake or whatever and we're all just kind of pretending. So I will take that point, but I don't see how there's who is willing to meet in the middle, who's willing to risk. How does that work in these relationships is I guess what I'm asking.
Yeah, I mean, different relationships have different stakes. And so like, like the romantic relationship, I think for everybody is like usually the most intense shit. So I would say like, like there's certain certain things to clear, so to speak, that allow me to feel close to somebody. Like I have to see somebody has a certain kind of character, a certain kind of depth, certain kind of humor, kind of like with Emeka saying, speaking to offering something. But then, yeah, when it comes to like the romantic relationship, I mean, it's the deeper and more intimate that relationship, the more shit gets triggered because it gets closer and closer to the primal image of connection. And it's sort of like saying like an emphatic yes to it, and then as Alexander spoke to, I think on the one she and David were on, it's like there's this like yes, but then there's all this like to say yes requires enduring all this shit that you don't want that's around it. And it's like I'm saying yes while at the same time like to move toward the yes is to like be like moving through jelly full of glass that is just like slowly tearing your face as you move toward the thing. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
And so I constantly go between this place of yeah, like of surrender, of letting myself fall into the mystery and letting my location be rocked or touched or whatever for a second, and then something comes up and it's kind of like kind of clockwork sometimes, where as soon as there's like a noticeable step into intimacy of any kind, like real I'm talking really deep intimacy that's like new territory intimacy, which is coming up a lot in my relationship. It's countered by like plaguing thoughts of jealousy or some other kind of shit that's just like feels like I'm dying. And yeah, so it's sort of this constant like thing has to come up and I can't ignore it, and I have to work through it. Unfortunately, I have a partner who is very patient with me, and we're working through our stuff together. But yeah, it's really difficult. That doesn't always feel like this, but there are times I get into where it feels like the real thing is never possible or something, and in a sense, it isn't, because the real thing is based on a egoic early image. And so it's like, how do I recognize the spirit or the essence of the thing I want and sort of make peace and acceptance with the necessary conditions of life?
Mm-hmm. I mean, I know that we've been giving or like talking about how the Hexad types don't see reality clearly, because then it may disrupt their pattern. And so have to be in relationships or see relationships in a way that reinforces their ability to locate, and locate specifically through rejection and frustration. I think the attachment types, one disservice we do is, I mean, I think we have more openness to the field at the beginning, but there is an agenda for us, which is, how do I locate myself in response to this? And so that also clouds our ability to see reality clearly too, I think, and is a burden for both us and those we're in relationship with.
In what ways?
Is it a burden for us, or is it a burden for them, or both?
Both.
Well, I think that, if you get two attachment types doing that, like going around in circles, number one. Number two, it can come across as needy in a way that's, a little embarrassing, and also like a little probably heavy, not so fun to take, and understandably hard to take. There's also, I think Alexandra spoke about this too, there's an unwillingness sometimes to see difference, or to see, wow, if I really listen to this person, I might not like what I see.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And so now I have to maybe they're articulating something that really matters to them, but if I really get in touch with how I feel about it, we're going to have problems. So I'm either going to have to disown how I feel in myself, or disown their truth.
Yeah.
Wow. That's good. Yeah. So it's like, the Hexad types are forcing their location, and the attachment types might be trying to force sameness to continue the attachment.
Yeah. And when I have conversations with my mom, that shows up because she's an 8, and she tries to force her location a good amount, and I don't agree with her location a lot of the time. So unless she is willing to not force her location, we often don't have conversations, because I'm not willing to disown my feelings, or my, what I am. And so it can really mess with relationships. But it took me a long time to assert that.
Something that's coming up for me is, I think, Nancy, you mentioned this thing called, that you've experienced with your boyfriend, or fiance, that called fake intuition. So this idea of trying to force sameness for attachment types. So fake intuition being that you assume that the other person knows what you're thinking and feeling, because you're taking in what they're thinking and feeling. And so there's this some over familiar assumption that the other person is knows how you're thinking and feeling, or that you know how the other person is thinking and feeling, and you think it's the same as your thoughts. And it's interesting to see that play out in the group, or just in general, of people coming in with a certain location or a certain feeling, and expecting that we're gonna mirror it back to them in some way, or that, and that if we don't do that, then that we're violating this unspoken agreement of attachment, or which is based on some sameness.
Yeah, it's interesting to watch you guys interact with people that come in with that expectation, because I see them coming in with that expectation, and I'm like, this isn't going to go well.
Mhm.
So it's always interesting for me to watch this happen, because I'm like, I know that if there was some give on our side, they would be much happier about it. But that's also, I don't want there to be give on our side. So like, but it's just, it's funny, because I feel like I'm watching from the outside looking in, just being like, oh, I know how this is going to go.
Yeah. From my perspective, they're coming to us asking for a location. Please tell us what you see. Here are my typing materials. And I'm like, okay, here's our location. Here's what we see. And they're like, well, you did this to me. You didn't do this. And I'm like, wait, what?
Well,
but yeah, go ahead, Courtney.
Well, I was thinking about it, and in my, not that specific, but myself, and I was thinking for some reason the idea of like I was like thinking of myself like a bat, and this idea of echolocation, and part of it is I have no idea who these people are and whatever, but part of it is I literally can't. I need feedback to locate myself, and so some of it may be that I am like shifting where I am in response to you, but some of it is like I physically can't do the blank slate.
Yeah.
So even hearing your feedback helps me find where I am.
Yeah.
Yes.
The blank
And
slate
so,
is so intimidating and awful, to be honest.
so I need you to tell me that I'm a 9 so that I can articulate actually I'm a 5 or whatever. Because I couldn't find my 5 until you told me that.
Yeah.
But it's I guess the thing that trips me up is that somehow a stranger, me, is enrolled in that process where it's like I mean I'm just a person that you asked a question online, but I'm part of your finding yourself process. But now I'm being accused of not, respecting or mirroring some aspect of that process. So it's like there's a way that we're already in it together.
Mm-hmm.
That attachment types are assuming like we already kind of have a relationship of some kind.
We're in the human experience together.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, and I'm coming to you, so that means I may be open to liking you.
Right.
And yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and it's just very hard for people. I mean, you can hear it on this conversation. You guys know one another really well, and I'm getting to know you all, and we all have a lot of respect for one another. So we think.
We do. I didn't know that, Courtney.
Yeah. I still hate 6s.
Funny how she said that with doubt at the end. That was
There's a little upturn.
Right?
It's been my whole agenda for this call is just to hear how much you respect me. That's the only reason I got on. But anyway, I do think it is unimaginable that for many people, including myself, that you would get new information and you wouldn't quote unquote recalibrate.
Yeah.
Like that's inconceivable to me.
And it
no matter who it is.
Yeah. It's very frustrating to watch people just not recalibrate.
Well, what I find interesting is like when an attachment type, I've had experiences where an attachment type wants feedback on typing or something, and it's pretty clear to me what type they probably are. Like I'm not 100% certain, but and I'll give my feedback of like, well, I'm seeing this and this and this in you, and then they will give me more information to try to get me to recalibrate my impression. But often the kind and quality of information that they're giving me to recalibrate is actually reinforcing my impression. You know what I'm saying? Because it's not just a matter of that's where I go to, but it's like they may not be aware of, I don't know, the parameters of how their new information that's intended to get me on a different page or on their page, on their same page, is actually reinforcing the it's like it's different metrics of recalibration. Like I get this frustration when I'm like arguing with somebody about Enneagram stuff, and I'll present new information, and then there is a lack of calibration to the new information, and I might read it as like they're attached to the old way or something like that. I might make up my own fucking excuse or something, but it's interesting these different metrics of what
Bit
counts,
of a double standard.
what counts and constitutes recalibration worthy information.
One thing that I've noticed between like Hexad versus attachment is, at least from my point of view, is that from the Hexad point of view, that Hexad types, when they're during this typing process, are not going to lean too heavily on the idea that how I grew up or this other outside factor is going to, that I haven't talked to you yet about, is going to change your perception of me. And one thing that I continue to notice is that attachment types might get a typing and say, well, let me get you the rest of my life story. And once you see that, you're going to change or adapt to this new information. And so the idea that they're saying that like, well, why haven't you considered that the way I grew up hasn't completely shifted my type? And I think Hexad types are more comfortable with the idea that they've been the same type the whole time.
Mhm.
And a lot of attachment types think that either the way the information they provide or a certain experience might have altered their type. And I find that interesting, like as a feature of attachment that that perspective would be there because I'm thinking from my perspective is the more shit you say, the more we're finding the location.
Yeah.
And it's like they're saying the more shit you say, the more you're finding uh, other reasons why there isn't a location.
Mhm.
Well, yeah, this goes to the whole like identification with the I to begin with, right?
Yeah.
And this idea that one's I could shift over time.
Yeah.
Hexad types are actually not going to like that idea.
Nope.
No.
You know, there may be another kind of theory that hexide types might be have resistance in a different way, right? Um, I mean, so all of the people that you're kind of talking about who like request the recalibration, they're all attachment types.
No. I think don't get it twisted. Like Hexad types have their own versions of flipping out and trying to
Uh-huh.
force a typing.
Uh-huh.
But what I see happening when Hexad types, everyone is trying to manipulate or game the system of trying to figure out their type, but just the ways they're
Uh-huh.
doing it are slightly different. So attachment types really get personal, is what I've noticed. They personalize the feedback as more of a statement on their person. Like
Mhm.
you're saying that I'm not this because, and they're saying that we're doing something to them. And so there it can, especially with it can get like accusatory that we're not allowing them to be something. So
It's the
insert
word Nancy used earlier, violated. We're
yeah,
violating them.
by not like meeting them halfway. And I suspect that if there was a different method of gesturing to that place that they're at before moving them to the actual location, that it would land easier. I think the problem is that they're saying that you're not even listening or even trying to do this, play this game of seeing, being on the same page as I am. And so what I see with the Hexat types doing is like they think they're a different type and they're just going to keep pushing for that type, but it's going to be self-contained. Like they're not going to feel some type of way about us affecting their person or their sense, necessarily their sense of self. They're just pushing for what their location is. Like, I think I'm a 5, you guys think I'm a 7, I'm gonna keep pushing for this.
And you guys are dumb.
Yeah, like they're just gonna, in a self-contained way, but it's not gonna come from, well, enneagrammer doesn't understand, they think these types are cool, and they have this they don't personalize it. They don't, attachment types tend to really get personal, like in a way that there's an assumption that we have a relationship here and you're violating them some sense of, and you've done something to me by saying that I'm a
Well,
9.
yeah, because you do have a relationship from the attachment perspective.
Exactly.
Like that.
Yeah.
Like I can't actually. If I'm convinced I'm a 6 and you think I'm a 9, if you
I
still think I'm
can't.
a 9, I can't be sure I'm a 6.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
Uh,
That's see that, because I like feedback.
I feel that in my body of like God, like just like the sense of being already connected to people. Like
Right.
it like that in itself. I'm like, whoa, hold up,
Because I like feedback. I think, I tell this to people all the time, in typing sessions or whatever, is that this is like going to the changing room at a store or something, and there's like a three-dimensional mirror, and oh, I didn't see that thing back there because no one. I'm like a mirror. I'm gonna tell you that your zipper flies down, or this thing that you didn't see in the back, but you don't have to actually take that feedback as you can take that point of view and do whatever you want with it, because that's what I assume I'm going to do. Feedback is great. I can get feedback from strangers and they're going to give me an unbiased perspective. They don't fucking know me, and I can decide to see if that's useful to me in some way or not, but that's not the attachment perspective, you
Well,
know
it's kind of funny because when you guys were talking about how you give feedback to these people, my first reaction is, well, you aren't very you don't meet them in the middle when they're like, well, what about this? You just go, no, it's still you're still a 9, and they want you to go, oh, well, that's a really interesting story. So when I was this, and here's my story about this, and they want
Oh,
in the middle. So the fact, so like, I'm not saying that would change their mind,
right,
but
right,
that would
right.
change their
Feeling about it.
reaction to it, because they would be like, oh, you're connecting with me. See, there's like this connection that you also agree is here. And the fact that you're
Mm.
just like, no, there's no connection, and I still think you're a 9. They're just like, what?
Because I mean, I'm thinking if I can provide clear reasoning, because
No.
it's like I know where you think you might be.
Right.
I'm going to show you that these are clear distinctions for why that's not true, and you have every right to disagree. But here are the reasons for why this is not what you think it is. But I don't think that's what they're looking for. They're looking for kind of more of a personal recognition of that position. You know, whether or not they decide to go either way, it's how they feel about it. And like,
Yeah.
am I respecting the fact that there is some kind of connection here?
Yeah.
And I'm
And
not.
if you're not, it's really jarring. And it can be very upsetting.
So one of the other things I was curious about when you guys were having that conversation about yes, no, that I wanted to ask David and Nancy is, and I was trying to understand, like, are 6s the most attached sheet of the attachment types?
Yes.
I think
I
we
don't-
are, right?
Why is that though? People have been saying things in the group because it seems like between 3, 6, and 9, they're doing attachment differently. I've heard some 3s like saying I don't necessarily relate to this, and 6
Yeah.
is saying that I don't. They're not doing it the 3 and 9 way. So it just seems like a different form of attachment. I can't say if it's the most attached.
So one thing, and this is what I wanted to ask David. So I think there's a couple things going on. So the first thing is my yes no is very heady, and I everything is context for me to begin with. So I actually can feel the yes. There's a familial yes and no that like Alexandra's talking about too, but I can feel in myself, if I'm only in my headspace, a yes and a no existing simultaneously. Or I'll feel a yes, but what about this and what about that? And so it's always got some like asterisks and caveats to it. So that's
So,
one
like,
thing.
even when you're alone, is what you're saying?
100%.
Okay.
If I'm only in my headspace.
Okay.
So it's never one or the other. There's always a no within the yes.
100%. Unless I go to another part of my body. If I only allow myself to stay up in my head, there's never a firm yes no.
I do relate to that, but I also have a 6 fix. I think the way I've always heard 6s explained is like they have a committee in their head, and that in this instance makes a lot of sense. Like, you're never truly alone, maybe.
Well, also I'm committed to doing no harm,
Mm,
right? I'm committed to what's the best course of action here. And I've defined that in a collective way.
mm,
And I actually, by definition, can't see it. So I tie myself up in knots trying to figure out what the best course of action is, because I'm not paying attention to what I want,
right.
because that's actually not what I'm going for. And the reality is it's actually unknowable what the best course of action is.
Yeah.
Oftentimes, if I don't pay attention to what I want. If I'm trying to figure out what to do with my family, or figure out who to vote for, or figure out whether I'm going to get on this podcast or whatever, it all depends. Like, what are you going to say? What's going to happen next? Blah, 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 blah. Like, and off I go. And I think that's a very 6
Yeah.
experience.
Is it that you're saying that the yes no really depends on what's happening? Like it's a situational yes or no?
Yes. It's
Okay.
all context. It's all context.
And so that means that a yes that works right now can then become a no if the situation changes.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Are you social first?
Yeah.
Shit.
Okay.
Right? Yes. What do you say? What do you say?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, yes.
I don't know.
Well, the situation has changed, so
Yeah,
you
exactly. So we don't really know.
Yes and no.
know,
I'm
that,
just
that,
wondering how much of that is social and how much of that is 6. Not to take away from your experience. I don't know the separation.
Social does add another layer of that whole context
Right.
piece.
Context is big with social.
Yeah.
I really am feeling a matrix. Like, how can I, and also I'm very action oriented. Like, what am I supposed to do here?
mm-hmm.
Just like, what
Mhm.
am I supposed to be doing? Like
Hmm.
that's what I keep going back to over. That's the yes no for me. Like that's where all those yeses and nos sit, is what do I do? That's where I feel the most confusion. And so for me, it's like, how can I tell what to do if I don't know what you're going to do in response?
Mm, yeah.
Wow.
God.
I think that's core six stuff. That's really
man.
core
Help.
six
Yeah,
stuff
I
right
would say
there.
that's pretty core 6. Because I was gonna say I relate to an extent to that, but the end all be all is okay. But what would make me feel good, right?
Mhm.
Versus the 6 is what is good.
Yeah, that's one thing I appreciate about sixes is they are oriented to action. Like the yes and no and figuring out what to do is dependent on what's happening and how the situation is changing. So in terms of like some of my closest friends are best friends is 6, and I've always wondered why does that work? And part of the thing I think is that they're always adjusting based on what's happening and orienting to what I should do, and so they're pretty awake to the situation. And as an 8, I can appreciate that sense of awakeness. It's like this is someone who's going to adjust to how a situation has changed even before I will. And so there's from a perspective of problem solving, that's something I really value as someone who's going to adjust to the changing situation and spot the problem before I will. But no, that's a great insight in terms of the yes and no is never certain because every situation is always in flux. So how can you
Yeah.
really know?
Well, and that's what I feel like gets a little lost, right? For the hexad types is the unwillingness to see the flux.
Mm,
Yeah. There's like one point of singular meaning that everything stems from, and so it's like as long as you're adhering to the singular point of origin of things, and like that's all that counts.
mhm,
Everything else is just is a passing ephemeral thing that doesn't matter. Is like the way it feels like, and I know that's through the 4 lens of like my core singular identity that everything else is just footnotes to. But it's like this feeling of like, yeah, the flux. It's like doesn't even make enough sense for me to relate to it.
Mhm. But that's why, and that's what I wanted to ask David and Nancy is that's part of the reason why I have to override like body and heart information. I'm ignoring it. I'm discounting it. I'm disassociating it. I'm dismissing it. I've got all kinds of stories about why that information doesn't belong in the field. And I guess I was curious. In some ways, I'm committed to the yes no, right? I'm committed to straddling and being situational because that's how I think I get to the best course of action.
Right.
And
And that's
so
also a location.
yeah. So I'm located through like a flexibility
Mm-hmm.
and a responsiveness. And so to do that, I have to override or I have to use whatever heart and body information I'm getting and make it no more or less important than every other piece of information I'm getting.
Yeah,
Mhm.
I get that.
And so that was my curiosity about the 3 and the 9, whether it's similar for you all or just because there's a different orientation to what your heart and body and mind sense as what you want or what you should do or whatever word you want to use.
So I have to override my heart and body because I think they will choose inefficient paths.
mm,
And like it may be going towards what I want, like in an instance of going towards what I want, but I often think that my heart and my body will choose wrong and choose a way that's illogical, in a way that won't serve my self-pressiness best. So that's why I override with logic and stories and
Like you won't meet your goal if you listen to them.
exactly. It's kind of useless.
I don't have a sense of doing a lot of choosing. I'm just going.
That's why I
just
spoke
hap-
first.
It's just happening and it's going. I'm just doing. I'm just moving. It's happening.
Oh
There's
my
not
God.
I'm not but I mean I've got a lot of frustration. I've got 1, 7 and 4 in me, right? So there's a lot of like, no, that's shit. You know what I mean? And social last, I don't care. I mean, I'm on a I'm out of state right now working with leading a crew of 5 SPSOs, 6s and 9s, right? And you know, they're all wanting to do stuff and go to dinner and lunch and all that stuff. And I do it because I know my tendency would be to just never talk to any of them. Because I'm pretty clear on that. No, because I'm not interested in these people. I'm interested in the money I'm going to make and going back home and doing whatever the hell I want to do. But I give them trinkets of me, you know, going to dinner with them or whatever, or else it just turns dark. You know what I mean? Because I've done that before and I know not to do that. But yeah, I don't have a sense of there being like a lot of problems of decisions, you know. I'm just either interested in something or I'm not. And it's happening now or it's not, or I'm going towards it or not.
Oh man, that's boiling up some fucking frustration. Me, want to smack the shit out of you.
Why? What do you mean?
Why?
It's just, it's so inefficient. How do you do anything? And it's very much what Brian does.
It doesn't seem intentional. At least from my perspective, because for me, it's like every choice needs to be intentional. Did you
Yeah.
intend to get here?
Mhm,
But that's sort of my own Hexad 8 stuff is like, you know, I'm meant to get here. That's why I'm here.
Right. But I don't disagree with that. It's like my thing is like, how are you going to plan for anything?
Mm.
How is anybody else going to know what's going on in your life at any given moment?
But I mean, some of it's just rolling with my gut in the moment of what's happening. I mean, I'm doing something that there's something I'm getting out of it. I'm making decisions on the fly, and it's not a bunch of heady stuff like, oh no, what do I do? You know what I mean? I'm just going.
What are you trying to say, David?
Yeah, I'm
What
making.
are you trying to
Is that
say?
me in
Are
that
you
moment?
mocking us?
Yes.
Wow.
That's
Yeah,
not
it's
really
just-
what I sound like, is it?
You sound worse.
Yes.
No,
Uh,
Courtney,
You know,
it's
I'm
not.
on Courtney's side
Is-
now. You don't sound like that, Courtney.
No, you do not sound like that, Courtney.
Yeah, no. Yeah, I don't know another way to say it. I'm a terrible representative for the attachment gang. I'm definitely doing attachment. I mean, there's something, I mean, you've heard it in the earlier conversations. There's something that I'm doing at an energetic level that's attracting attachment. And people want to be around me, kind of all the time, everywhere. And so for me, partly because I'm social last and because I don't have other attachment fixes in my trifix, the feeling is I have that anytime and I don't really, I can take it or leave it. You know what I mean? It's already there, it's done. So what's the more interesting thing?
Mhm.
That's all my
Nancy and
conscious
Alex,
stuff. You know, that's
yeah,
my
yeah, yeah.
conscious. So there's got to
yeah.
be some painful stuff. I understand, right? There's the more vulnerable. I mean, that just made me sound like a hard ass, badass, whatever. But you know what I mean? It's not, there is the ugly, raw stuff. So, you know, some other kind of questioning might have to get me there.
Well, yeah, so that was my next question. The what Nancy spoke about, what Alexandra spoke about, and what I also feel, you know, the sort of the self-betrayal or I'm on this ride and I was blaming other people for me being on the ride. And now I see it was because of me acquiescing all along. Or also for me, what I might feel is the diminishment of, you know, I can't do what I'm supposed to do here because I refuse to listen to myself. Like, do any of those resonate with you? Any of those judgments and regrets?
Well, yeah. So another complication that makes me a special snowflake is that I've been watching myself be a 9 for 30 years. And so that whole thing of acquiescing and going with other people's agendas is like a specific thing that I targeted to develop my capacity to say no. I'm not. I'm just have a pretty clear no about that kind of stuff. But yes, when I was younger, I did a considerable amount of going with other people's agendas. I can remember a good friend of mine who's a sexual too, back when I was 19 or 20 or something, kind of confronting me. This is not some terrible tragedy or whatever, but that he called me a party doll. We were all a serious group of druggy partiers and stuff. And I would just
Shocking.
I would just, yeah, I was just going wherever, you know what I mean? And I was kind of probably withholding a lot of what was going on for me internally, just going along and just sort of being another face in the crowd. And so that's what he was confronting me with, was that kind of um, overly over malleability.
And it must, even if like you've done all that work, there must still be like a, you have to catch yourself because it has to be your
Oh
habit.
yeah,
So do you feel that in yourself? Would be just easier to go along or whatever story the 9 makes up, like,
yeah. No, there's
this is
still
just
the
not worth it.
reflex. Yeah, so there's definitely still, in all kinds of contexts, the reflex to literally and figuratively nod my head yes. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, to want to see agreement and alignment and common direction or interests, but also knowing that I'm not actually going to go that same direction with them.
Because
So,
one of the thoughts I had also as I was thinking about the 369 and what I was saying, are the 6 is the most attachy of us all, is also this the dutiful versus aggressive versus withdrawal kind of stance of the 3 of us.
hmm hmm
And I had this image, and I have no idea if this is right, but just that even like the tiniest whiff of attachment would actually just be best for the 9, so that you can withdraw,
yes,
but also there feels like just there's
Oh, that's
still like a
interesting.
little something there.
yeah. I think it's partly that whiff. I don't know if it's the right analogy or whatever, but that's like a seed that grows in the body and flushes through the expanse of the body or something like that, and you just need that small amount. And because you're doing
Mhm.
positive outlook is kind of growth and sunshine, let's say. And so it's a certain kind of life giving optimism, so you can take a nugget and make that internally at the nonverbal level of the body into maybe something bigger than it ever was or should be. And that's part of positive outlook is you're sort of expanding things into positive light or something,
Even if it's not there.
even if it's
Maybe.
not there, or if it's just micro. Oh yeah, certainly. Yeah, it's definitely delusional.
Yeah. Can I tell you a quick story about that?
Yes.
So it happened pretty recently. So I have a friend who I believe is a 1 and another friend who's a 9. And said 9 fell head over heels with this one. This one gave no indication.
Mm,
Like
right.
very, very little like
Mhm.
indication towards liking this person, and even had multiple conversations saying, no, this isn't going to work. And the 9, professed their love for like the third time.
Mm.
and was really emotionally really crushed and really like believed that it was there, took this and ran with it, and
Mhm.
obviously built up an entire relationship in their head of what this was. And then the fact that they were rejected, they believed that it was there to begin with, and the rejection was then just out of the blue.
Mm.
And that's how far I feel like nines can take it. They can just take this one indication and just be like, create an entire world around it. And that's
Right.
all the attachment that they need to do that.
It's so, and it's similar, then referring to another triad. The gut is, like gut types in general, all of them can take, for example, just one or two or three facts about something and make a whole universe from it.
Yeah, fuck yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's one of the frustrating things about the gut types. And maybe nine, well, nine's probably the central culprit there, as an
Yeah.
energy.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, because it kind of represents that sort of universal field or something like that.
Yeah, that's really interesting to think of 9 needing the least amount of attachment.
Mhm.
Well, I'm curious about 9 versus 3, because now that I'm looking at it, it does seem like 6 is the clingiest of the.
Woohoo!
You won. Good job, Courtney. Gold medal. Blue ribbon.
Yeah, I'm curious about 3. Like, what does 3 need to get going in terms of attachment?
Kind of hard to answer.
What if like, I mean, you're speaking to like us not liking Brian. Like
Yeah,
what if,
yeah.
yeah, like what if we hate Brian?
That just made my tummy hurt. Um, what do you mean by that? I don't fully understand
But
what
I'm
you're.
trying to just get it. Like I knew that would sort of provoke something, so I'm trying to get
Sure.
it. Like what, like when, like yeah, what is, yeah, what's the, what's I don't know how to even phrase it, but like what's the bare minimum of attachment? Like what
What would
gets
you
the
need from
attachment
us?
going? Yeah, or like what, or it's some stranger or something. Like, do they have to be somebody that like sees you in some way? Like,
No, I mean that's nice. I guess it's admiration, a bit of admiration, maybe, or like,
Okay.
um, yeah, like there's something around like
you admiring
admiration,
them.
or the other way around. Either one.
What I got when you were saying that about anxiety about how we would see you and Brian was it did feel emotional to me, like you were carrying what our the frame picture of you and Brian. Would we like it? Would we frown upon it? It's almost like
Mhm.
really paying attention to the facial expressions and the emotional reaction to the image of you as a couple.
Mm.
And so, I have always felt this sensitivity in threes to, they're tracking people so closely because they're looking at like the minute little reactions of, good, bad. Is this person impressed by this or not? And very minute changes in that, very sensitive to that.
Yeah.
And wanting some level of they're impressed or they like this framed picture.
Mhm.
For me, my husband is a self-pres 3, and maybe he's got his own thing going on, but what I really see is, and I've been super curious about it and thinking about it a lot, just even separate from him, but just on this, because from a 6 perspective, that assertive, aggressive stance that the 3 can take, it can feel very cold
Mm,
and
Mhm.
um, very transactional. And even as they're a heart type, willing to trade in or not necessarily, care about another person's perspective or feelings. And what I really notice in him is there is kind of an elitism around these people's opinions matter to me and these people's don't.
Yes.
mm,
And so if you're in one category, all the stuff that we're sort of talking about matters. But I almost feel like that judgment is there to enable him to, and it's like the other people don't matter. And so therefore, I can do whatever I want with them.
It's a bit of a protective barrier.
Yeah. I don't have to deal with the fact that I'm hurting this person. I
Right.
can maintain an aggressive stance and an attached stance by saying, like, I only attach to this kind of person.
Exactly.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, one of the things that I was interested in hearing on this call and hopefully future calls is just how this stuff is showing up from the different centers, because it is very different. And some of the reactions people have been having to these pods, because we haven't had a six on to talk about how attachment shows up for six. It's just been really interesting. Like, it's very different from the perspective of these three centers and what is needed, because because they are assertive types, it's like it does seem less personal. And six is the one that seems the most in it with the people, in it with the I've got to be in the situation with you and we're figuring this out together. And nine can construct a whole fantasy world based on
Yep.
just one little nugget of attachment. So that's really interesting.
Yeah, and I think some of it, I wonder too if it is, I can read people, but it's not that three sort of, I see what you're up to there, like I don't feel like I'm good at manipulating people in a good and a bad sense of the word, um, in a way that I think threes manipulate is a pejorative, but um,
Yeah, but
that I get you. I get I get how to influence you.
mhm.
I don't have that way of, because that if you have that skill, attachment has a different, I get what gets you in the game. You know what I mean? From a
Yes.
three, and I don't think sixes are relating to it that way.
Yeah, and I think that's what I appreciate so much about sixes. Is like, I don't know, there's just a rawness to sixes that they're just like they're doing attachment, but they're doing it from like a very honest place. And as a three, that's really refreshing.
To me, six is the archetypal human. I mean, it's the human problem embodied in a certain way.
Yeah.
That's in a way that's, lovable and at the same time, just in the hell of it, of what it
Mhm.
is to be a person.
Yeah. I feel like a six is always going to understand,
Yeah.
Yeah. Hmm.
which is really nice.
Yeah, I need that.
You
I
had some
think
experience
there's
with six?
A little bit. A little bit. A little bit.
I think there's something also, like we think of all of the attachment types in some ways lying to themselves. Um, and for me, the three is like, I thought this is who I was, and it turns out it's not. And like I've been lying to myself. Like the six is much more, and I think it's related to attachment. The six is like I like doing all this stuff that I don't want to do. And I'm very aware that I'm like doing stuff that's not what I want. And it's like that negative merging, the reactivity, the resentment, all the things that the six is feeling. That we do this dance of I can't get what I want if I don't work with you. And if I work with you, I gotta
Do the
give up
dance.
stuff. Yeah, I gotta do the dance, which means I gotta do stuff I don't want to do.
I get that.
That's the circle.
And you can get stuck in that forever.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. And I don't think the nine is certainly going along with a lot of things, but I think there's a disassociation as it's happening.
Yes.
Yes.
Six is really
Very
six
much
is
yes.
really six is really involved, just like sort of at multiple levels. It's real actually engaged.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's what makes it so special a lot of times, because they're like in it with you, and threes and nines are like, well, we're tertiary.
Well, and that's what I really meant by that context. I cannot
Mhm.
understand. It's like when I move my arm, John way over there is moving his body in a way that is because I moved my arm here. Like
Right.
like I mean I'm making that up, but like it's that kind of feeling
Mm.
that is both deeply connecting but also paralyzing.
Yeah.
God.
This has been really interesting. Just I think we could have more conversations about how the 3, 6, and 9 are doing attachment, but that's something I'm
Yeah.
really curious about because it is showing up very differently.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and the metrics of attachment are very interesting. And like what I mean by that is like on one hand, like all right, just to you as a contrast point for myself, like very few things fit the potential ideal, all right, that could get frustrated. So it's like to get frustrated properly. Uh, something has to hit my emotional back walls in a particular way that's like, oh, this is almost it.
Yeah.
And then I get frustrated by the almost.
Oof.
And try to force it into the thing and then get frustrated. But with the attachment, you know, it does seem like it would have to have some kind of resonance with an early life pattern, like some kind of familial. I think in the previous episodes we talked about like a familial imprint or introjected sense. But it also seems like, and maybe this is me reading too much into attachment, but it also seems like because attachment types are adaptable, that even that template can adapt. This template that like gives something the green light to be attachment worthy or not. And I could see sometimes that being a really good thing in terms of growth, and then other times that being like a very confusing thing. Like I think of, like yeah, like sixes, like interjecting different authority figures that may be in conflict with each other at certain times. And so, like, what is it that gives a green light for attachment? Especially if their attachment template, so to speak, is evolving.
Yeah, there's definitely more discernment for better or worse in the three.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
You know, like
Yeah.
is this person attachment worthy?
That gets back to my sort of abstract idea of 3, 6, 9 as multiples of 3. 3 is a singular. It's a singularity of mind in a more significant way, or being in that can be more cutting or incisive perceptually.
Yeah.
Because it's a single 3, and 6 is the problem of 2 3s, yes, no, and then 9 is a fucking crowd of 3 3s, and thus a vagueness.
So they don't need much to get going with attachment, and 3 needs the most to get going with their attachment.
Oh, that's
Well,
interesting.
Well, like like
yeah,
9 needing
yeah.
just
Oh,
like a
okay, I
nugget,
get you.
Mm-hmm.
9
Yeah,
needing
that does
just
make sense. Yeah.
like a really
Interesting.
little nugget to create a whole world of attachment from, and 3 having a more specific this person's worthy for me, and then 6 is more in the middle where they're really there and they're tracking everything that's happening.
I do think that threes are. It's like again, and you can think about like reconciling force. Like sixes are tracking everything, but like as in like they're each dots,
Hmm.
but we're tracking them all. Versus sort of this like vague cloud of the 9.
Right.
Like and
Fog.
and the 3 it's true, and the 3 is it's like a few points,
Mm.
Yeah, that hits.
because I was
The
trying to say,
big
but
cloud
maybe
of 9.
Yep.
well, and that's partially right, like so like also it's like at some level I guess you always feel you're connected to the universe or something, right? Like so
Some bullshit like that.
right, like
Yeah.
there's a fallback like of attachment,
Yeah.
that's bigger than like any one relationship maybe.
Yeah, that's true. That's interesting. I guess part of the vagueness is that the relationships in some ways um, could have some interchangeability.
Mm. Yeah, I feel that. One gripe I have is that, back to your point, Courtney, about 6 being the most attached, they're attached to the most points, to the most data points. So it feels like a really
Fuck yeah.
secure attachment in the sense that they're tracking more stuff about the thing that they're attached to. Whereas 9 is more, it feels like, what are 9s attaching to, when it seems like they can take one little nugget and create a whole world of attachment. So anyone could be interchangeable in that attachment. It's like attachment to the whole world.
Yeah.
to the whole thing. Whereas threes have a specific criteria for who is worthy of the attachment to needing that affirmation or mirroring, and they seem the least attached to their because that's, I don't know if that makes sense, but
That makes sense to me. That's interesting.
And so this is me trying to understand the social lens too, like because I was thinking about it also like the intermediate step. Like I'll have attachment to like family.
Mhm.
What the hell does that mean? Like who
Yeah.
is that? Like, uh yeah, or community. What? Like
Right.
Yeah.
like it's a thing that's made up of individuals. So, so I'm trying to figure out if that's a social thing. And so a three would like be a social three would have attachment to groups in that way, but it would be discerning. He or she would be discerning about the group. Or if that's also like an intermediate, just the idea that like to like have someone be an authority, like that's
Mhm.
already an abstraction, like a church or, or like an ideology or whatever. Like it's another intermediate step between the cloud and a point.
Mhm. Like,
One thing I wanted to jump back to was that whatever sort of abstract image you were doing there, Courtney, with like you moving your arm and then John being in some totally other space doing something with his body relative to that. I mean, I notice in contexts where it's me and another person, especially, that there's, and this is trying to get to how am I doing attaching, and this is like super subterranean body type stuff, is I notice that people mirror my body language a lot and that I'm leading. Like when I'm leaning against a certain wall or a car in a certain way, the other person does it. And it's sort of, and that's a kind of attachment at the level of the body where it's just
Mhm.
energy.
Mhm.
And it's it's a certain kind of I don't know, interrelational dance that's happening non-verbally in connection.
And does that feel like enough for you? Like, does that fill you?
um I don't know. I as far as me and friendships and relationships and with being with people, I mean, most people, like, I'm thinking of that just recently because it's come up with the people that I'm working with. And again, I don't care about them. So I'm not wanting, my preference actually would be to not see them and just maybe talk to them on the phone every once in a while. So, what I'm referring to is in the context of, sort of often just casual conversation where I'm just getting through a conversation or just being mildly friendly with somebody, just shooting the breeze. I'm not looking for there to be something more, and I'm not wanting to have a relationship with most people.
Hmm.
I don't know if that's answering your question.
I think one of the things I mentioned, just at least online, um, because as a social blind, I think David wouldn't relate to wanting to be friends or start relationships with people. But compared to John and I, who are also social blind, there's a sense of openness or assumption that we are in this together, and you're invited, even though
Mhm.
even though he has no intention of starting a relationship. David does put out the vibe that you're all invited, and whether unconsciously that's happening, and people do feel that.
And it's an energy that comes through somehow in the writing, and it's again a body thing that uh, it's energetic. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I might be saying that, not to say that I'm disinterested in all people, but I'm interested in a specific type of person, and
Yeah.
everyone else can fuck off. That's kind of, so it's rejecting most of things except a few things. But I think the opposite is going on with David, even though he's very specific. There's a vibe that he's putting out that he's saying that we're all in this, like we're all getting the same stuff. You guys can jump in the same pool that I'm in.
I think I'm doing something at some layer. I'm at least wanting attachment coming toward me,
Yes.
the interest in attachment, and I'm obviously doing something at an energetic level, and maybe I don't know other levels, mental, heart, or whatever. But so I just want to know that it's there.
Well, I think one thing from my perspective that I see is that the message that you're sending is that, hey, people, it doesn't really take much to get attachment going with me. That's what it feels like to me. Feels
Yeah,
like only a
it's a little
couple.
bit slutty.
Yeah, yeah. It's kind of yeah, just way too. Oh, it's like, hey, it wouldn't take much. We could have some attachment, and I'm saying
Yes.
it's going to take a lot. it's
Right.
it's
Yeah.
going to take a hell of a lot to
Yeah.
get even me to even consider you as a fucking whatever.
Yep. Hmm.
It's interesting because it's like a good combination of it's like the withdrawal and the positive,
Hmm.
um, and also the body, kind of the energetic idea of attachment. It's just the mere invitation to someone else to come your way is enough, right? And that way you don't have to do anything more yourself either, right? Like you can just go off and do your stuff.
Right.
But
Well,
as
I'm
long
wanting to. I'm attracting. It's not just me inviting, if that's what you're saying. It's also that I'm seeing that the invitation is being met, or reacted to, and they're coming towards me. And so,
Right, but you don't want to have to necessarily do very much after that with
no,
most
I
of
do
those
not.
people. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
He
It's
just
like
wants he just wants the option of attachment present.
like a
Option.
big
A lot of
pool.
options.
Yeah.
A pool. It's a splashy pool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's what I mean, that warmth, that openness, like that I'm relatable, and it's a lack of discernment too, right?
Mhm.
Because it's like
Sure.
as long as I get a little bit of food in here, and then I don't have to do
That's it.
anything else.
Yes.
That's it. And food's good because it is as I've said, it's self-prezi in the sense of I understand at some level that I want a certain amount of this commodity, and I don't
Mhm.
need any more than that. And
Mhm.
I can plug in a modular way with people that's not particularly involved.
See, there it is for me. I assume that if I'm gonna get involved with people, that it's
Hmm.
well, I'm paying attention to someone, then I have to justify my attention, which means I need to get you know dive all the way into it. So
Hmm.
there's a sense of discernment in who am I going to invest my energy into, who am I going to let in, who's worth it, the
Hmm.
who's worth the point. Where it seems like at least understanding, I guess, what's going on for Nine is that I just want some attachment here, and it doesn't really take much for me to get that, and I'm not really going to go that deep into this one person, so who cares? Like, let's just have everyone's invited.
Hmm.
Whereas I'm going to be at the party stuck in a corner with this person for like an hour, so I better make sure that this person is going to be worth that time. That's from my perspective. I'm going to spend more time deciding on whether if this person's worth it or not.
And
Right.
it does get iterated out like very radically differently. Like with Alexandra, part of social is an intelligence about
Yes.
it's a discernment about who to let in, or it's much more tracking what's actually going on for certain other people, and you can locate a yes no or something in between as far as connecting with somebody. And so part of what I'm describing, everything I've said here, is partly my social blindness.
hmm And it's also specific to self-pres sexual, because a distinction between self-pres sexual and sexual self-pres is that self-pres is a lot more utilitarian, in the sense that this
Yeah.
person can provide some kind of goodies, whereas sexual is a little bit more on, I'm getting a hit of compatible or incompatible, and that's a
Yeah.
big thing for me, is that I'm getting a sense of repulsion or a sense of attraction to whatever this person is, and which is going to be a little bit more specific than the
Yep.
self-res, because it's like I have to feel that this person's presence is going to do something interesting for me to even like be able to engage them. And a lot of times when I have negative reactions to people, that's what it's based off of. It's just like I'm having a very specific repulsion to whatever this person
Yep.
represents.
Yep.
Because it's social blind sexual type, there
Mhm.
is a sense of reducing people to just that, to
Right.
how, because it's not even, I can get to the character whatever social aspect later, but it's like it's just a direct hit on how is this person's thing mixing with my thing.
Are
And
we
it-
going to start a fire together? Or
yeah,
something?
and it's something that I'm constantly doing or sensing into everyone. And it's hard to put words to that. Like, how do I explain to someone that this isn't working for me? Like, whatever this is. And it's kind of like a chemical mix of me and them. And I'm sensing it from the very first moment that I've encountered them. And there's nothing I can do about that. That's just that it's just what it is. So it's not a judgment call on that person. It's just like I have a very specific reaction to everyone in that way. And some people you're drawn to, and other people you're just like no, and that's just what it is.
Right.
John, how do you feel about that?
Yeah, I mean, I resonate with what you're saying. It's like, yeah, just like hooked into the specificity of chemistry.
Yeah.
And yeah, the idea of letting a lot of people in, I mean, it's just like a constant body sense of no.
Well, it's also from the sexual or the chemistry standpoint, is that some people generate deadness for me, and that's a very
Totally.
visceral body. As an 8, it's like chemistry is aliveness, and so I have to have around me devised a life where I have a continuous stream of this life force, which I believe is this potential to generate electricity. And so when someone shows up that's not doing that, it is a very overt experience of deadness. It's like a dead
Yeah.
end.
Yeah.
And how do you explain that to someone? How do I explain that this person is generating a dead end? And so that's when I start to get really reactive.
Yeah.
I have to experience a dead end, and I don't want to experience a dead end.
Yeah. Yeah. You're speaking also very much to an 8 sensibility, where it's like, I mean, I would use the same word as deadness, but it maybe has a different flavor. But it's
Mhm.
like they have no depth, they have no soul. It's everybody's fucking zombie.
Yeah.
And and then the ways I would like explain that to somebody has a lot to do with through my 4 lens of like certain kinds of individuation signals, and I'm not just, that's not like a sense that Hexad types from this metric or this point of view are more individuated. You know what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah.
of course, like David, obviously, attachment type, Alexander, attachment type, Courtney, attachment type, Nancy, attachment types, who are all very, very individuated in my,
Mhm.
like have a real flavor for me. Whereas like, I've known plenty of fucking Hexad types. I'm like, they're fucking dead inside,
Yep. Yeah.
But yeah, it's like this thing of like, and pointing to how much of like a product they are of just their pattern. And I put the 4-ish psychological lens on it, but yeah, I'm resonating.
So yeah, it's as a social blind, there's a way that you can sort of reduce people to how they generate from your own specific sexual instinct lens electricity for you. And when that's not happening, sometimes it can be hard to put words to that because you're social blind. So it's just like you're just reacting to this nothingness that you don't want to be there.
Right.
All right.
Cool.
Yeah, that's a fat one. I'm gonna split that up.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of really good heavy stuff here, so I'm excited.
Yeah.
Thank you, Courtney, for coming on once again.
Yeah,
That's
that's
so
excellent.
fun. Yeah,
Yeah.
let me know if you guys want to. There's like so much here. It's so fun to talk
Oh
about.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we should just, maybe plan the next one to be. You want to do the next one, Courtney?
Yes, we
You
need
want
to.
me to? I mean,
Yes, we want you. We need
Yeah.
you
Yes,
because we
we
want to
are.
look at 369 again and again and again. Please come back.
Yeah. Look at
Cycle. It keeps going in cycles and circles.
Yeah, we fucking want you, Courtney. Come back. We really like you. Jesus Christ.
I've been getting
like it.
training. I've been getting training in how to
Talk to us.
affirm 6. Yeah. It's like, it has to be stated.
We are
right.
all yeses on Courtney. No
Yeah.
no's.
I'm happy to come back. I want to think about what I like. Well, whatever. That's my issue.
No, you can just be yourself. You have
I
ideas
know, it's
already.
my
You don't have to have
issue.
a thing. You don't,
Well, it is. Oh, we got to go. But one, I mean, and I do really do have to do. But I do think that there is something around. There's something also around attachment to explore around like originality.
Yeah.
And like, because I have a
That's
big,
big.
right. Like I have a big story going that I have nothing to say. That's not derivative.
Yeah.
Because of that constant referencing.
That space of originality and so forth is such an ego trigger for so many people, or almost everybody, maybe.
Absolutely. Yeah. And
Yeah.
like, I mean, one thing I experienced with Alexandra is I'm like, I constantly say to Alexandra, I'm like, you're one of the top 10 experts on the Enneagram in the whole world. Because it's true. Like
Yeah, it is.
even though she has no sense or identification with that, like she knows it so fucking well, much better than any, can speak to it. And her Bermuda thing means, and social means like she watches all these like podcasts of like, I don't know, these, anyway, they'll like bring on Enneagram people, but they're like very like pop culture podcasts.
Right.
And the Enneagram people don't know shit. And I'm like, you could just do this shit. And you
Right.
could like none of us freaks could do that.
No,
like
we can't.
she could do that. And I'm
Yep.
like, you should just do that. Cause it's like, and she's like, oh, well, I don't even know what I would say. And it's like, you just open the channel. And it's like, I mean, I'm always I wanted her on this one. I just wasn't going to work out. But like, I mean, next time maybe Courtney's on, cause she was saying all this shit about, is clarifying so much stuff about like the personalness that you're speaking to, Emeka, of like when you're like talking through type with somebody and through attachment type and the personalness and like how, for example, if like they think that they're a 5 but they're really a 9, how to admit or to start seeing themselves as a 9 instead of a 5 may be betraying the attachment that the 5 thing was giving them. You know what I'm saying? It's like
Yep.
there's a betrayal element, and there was a lot more to it, but it was like fucking brilliant. And so I was like, you got so much shit, and I see that with all my fucking attachment friends and whatever. It's like there's so much going on there, and I see it really easily as a 4 because I'm always looking out for originality.
Yes.
And there was like, oh, I don't know if it's there, and it's like fucking there.
Yeah. Like I've talked about how Beth, my girlfriend who's a 6, who landed on some, life-changing insights for me in terms of being able to see myself. And she's always doing that. She's always coming up with, giving me new original insights, and she doesn't see that she's doing that. Like no matter how many times I'm like, she's like, oh, I don't know how to explain things. Like you're explaining things for me. Like you're coming up with new shit for me. But it seems like that's the issue with attachment types, not seeing how their location is specific.
Well, right, because like if you recorded us, we'd actually have more location than we give ourselves credit for. And if we recorded you guys move more than you give yourself the credit for.
Oh yeah.
All right. Thank you, Courtney.
So let me know. We'll keep chatting. It was fun.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay.
Talk to you soon.
Bye, guys.
Later, guys.
Mhm.
Bye.
Bye.